from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, the president promises aid for farmers hit hard by the trade war with China. But how will that aid come and in what form?
You would think that the easiest thing to do is basically build on what's been done.
Plus, what if a deal isn't done soon? It may be a much longer road. The calendar may say spring planting time, but that's not the reality for many.
I mean, we have a mud ball here. Could you imagine if you drove a tractor over it?
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. We have a lot to get to this morning between the trade war with China, commodity markets soaring on Tuesday, and a lack of crops in the ground. The latest crop progress report from USDA showing 70% of the corn has yet to be planted. To put that in perspective, USDA was calling for a 15 billion bushel crop this year, but right now, only 7.9 billion bushels of that is planted, and 91% of the soybeans are still not in the ground. We're now in one of the slowest planting years on record. The problem, conditions still just too wet.
The I-80 Planting Tour, brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
So this marks another week along our I-80 planting tour without seeing much planting. Ohio, one of the states struggling big time right now, with only 4% of corn planted. The 5-year average, 54%. Betsy Gibbon has a story from Swanton, Ohio.
Time is tight.
The last time I checked it in here, it was about 58 or 59 degrees.
And spring is sensitive to farmers across the Corn Belt.
You know, I'm not so much worried about the ground temperature anymore because it's bound to warm up out. Our worst thing is our fields are wet.
For John Myers,
I farmed all my life. I'm 74 years old.
And his 2 sons, it's a saturated spring in Swanton, Ohio.
Our ground, it varies a lot from sand to clay.
Some fields covered in water, others remain muddy.
I mean, we have a mud ball here. Could you imagine if you drove a tractor over it?
All leaving their marks.
That kind of tells you how wet our ground is, and this ground is tiled.
On the spring, unlike anything John has seen in 50 years.
He's most probably 500 acres behind spraying at the moment, and every day you can add more acres to that.
USDA says Ohio was 40 points behind the 5-year average with corn planting. It's nearly 20 points behind for soybeans. But the stress this spring goes beyond weather. An escalating trade war with China and growing stockpiles of grain sending prices lower and soybeans to their lowest point in more than a decade.
We try to push the pencil a little harder, and you know, it seems like the markets just keep going down, and other countries had good crops, carryovers there. China simply doesn't need our grain right now.
President Trump and Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue promising success.
Our trade affairs are not cooperating. There's just no markets for soybeans. I mean, there's absolutely no markets. We are sit here, we don't know what to think or what to do. I mean, we really don't.
And while these may be situations John's sons haven't seen in their farming career.
Well, you know, I think that a year like this could maybe teach them more than 10 years of good times.
They're working through a taxing spring, one they hope doesn't end with them fully underwater. Reporting in Swanton, Ohio, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
All right, thanks, Betsy. President Trump continuing to sound optimistic about reaching a trade deal with China, even as his administration is talking about raising tariffs to 25% on all remaining Chinese imports. President Trump taking to Twitter again, quote, "Our great patriot farmers will be one of the biggest beneficiaries of what is happening now. Hopefully China will do us the honor of continuing to buy our great farm products, the best. But if not, your country will be making up the difference based on a very high China buy. This money will come from the massive tariffs being paid to the United States for allowing China and others to do business with us. The farmers have been forgotten for many years. Their time is now," end quote. But how will that tariff relief be paid? USDA Trade Undersecretary Ted McKinney says details will be out in days, not weeks or months. He says it will have an all-of-the-above approach, and he went on to say the department is still finalizing details, but, quote, "We want it to be robust." Now, policy watchers expect something similar to the market facilitation program from 2018.
You would think that the easiest thing to do is basically build on what's been done. Some sort of aid directly to producers. Also, part of that package was do more market development, buy commodities for the food pantries and all of that. The president added an additional component of bringing up the issue of international humanitarian assistance. You know, we have programs for that. I'm sure USDA and the U.S. Agency for International Development, which also runs those programs, can look at that and see what more they can do.
Meanwhile, U.S. tariffs won't impact shipments already en route, rather shipments made after last week's announcement. Likewise, China's tariffs won't start until June 1st. Dave Salmonson with the American Farm Bureau says that gives both countries room to make a deal, and the fact that conversations continue is a good sign.
We can do a deal with China that has to do with walking back tariffs and doing purchases. And I think they can agree with that fairly quickly. Maybe some things on the major substantive issues. But, you know, we've got a lot of different issues with China, and some of them are going to have to wait and be the product of more negotiation. But certainly I think there is a deal to be had now. It may not be the complete deal, but it'll be an initial go at it and then do more later.
He expects something to happen before or during the G20 meeting scheduled for June. However, if that deadline passes, Washington policy expert John Gilliland says agriculture may be in for a prolonged trade battle.
They could reach an agreement as quickly as they started off this trade dispute. So anything is possible. But I think that whether we have an agreement on paper is different than whether we have enforcement in fact. I think we're in for a long-term stasis with China. This is the new terms of trade, whether they're on paper or not. This is what we should get used to.
Gilliland says the most concerning thing is that both sides think time is on their side. Farmers are racing to get a crop in when they can these days. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen joins us with more in today's Crop Comments. Cindy.
Well, Clinton, we have a great shot to share with you this morning. T. Binder up on Twitter took this photo in Nebraska. Now, he tweeted, quote, "Great way to end plant 19 soybeans. Just look at that beautiful sunset and some lightning to boot. What a wonderful shot. Thanks for sharing that." Well, let's take a look at our wind forecast for the day today, and we are going to be seeing fairly quieter conditions as we head to the eastern part of the country. You can see the winds mainly up in the northern plains and then off in the southwest, where we're going to be seeing some wet weather continuing for the next couple of days. Overnight, mostly quiet conditions. Watch what happens on Thursday as we really see those winds blossom, especially in the western parts of the United States. I'll have more on your national forecast coming up.
A third lawsuit and a third straight loss for Bayer over glyphosate, and it's the largest verdict to date. A Northern California jury awarding more than $2 billion to a California couple who blame the Roundup weed killer for causing their cancer. Now, Bayer continues to insist the legacy Monsanto product is safe and that it will appeal. But investors are adding pressure as the company has seen some 13,000 similar claims filed. As African swine fever continues to spread, we'll talk about the impact of feed and what it could mean for soybean meal in the coming months. And later, taking a college tour without having to actually go there. We'll show you coming up in the country.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Bacon is back, baby, at least on the CME. It announced it has started publishing a new CME Fresh Bacon Index. Now, it's to establish a transparent price reference for fresh pork bellies used to make bacon. The CME says prices for pork bellies are the most volatile of all the pork primal cuts. Now, volatility peaked at over 40% last year. What a difference a day makes as markets swung from record lows on Monday to one of the single biggest day moves in recent memory. More on what's been a wild ride from the floor of the CME.
Turnaround Tuesday again. That's a nice thing to say. After seeing what happened yesterday, the market was kind of slaughtered across the board. But look, we've seen a nice move higher in corn. Let's get the biggest elephant in the room out of the way, and that's planting delays. Now, in the past, it seems to be the case, but the market wants to ignore a lot of times for 2 or 3 or maybe sometimes even 4 weeks that it's too wet out there, and so we finally get some empirical data that says it's too wet out there, and we got that last night. We've retraced half of the 56-cent break from the beginning of the year, basically, in 48 hours. That's a good move, right? So a 56-cent break, which basically has taken us 4 months-ish, we've gotten back half of it in 48 hours. That's a pretty volatile move. That'll give you an idea about just how volatile things are across the board.
Ted Seifert, Zaner Ag Hedge. Ted, let's talk about this ASF issue and how that starts to work into kind of either global hog supplies or even grain. I mean, all of these things kind of work together, right?
Yes. So there's a lot of moving parts here, right? I mean, obviously with ASF over in China and Southeast Asia, that could potentially be creating more demand for our pork, which is a very good thing.
Absolutely.
However, at the same time, we're also very afraid that ASF might spread here or to Mexico and then here. And that would be a very bad thing, not only for our pork industry, but for our grain industry as well. So until that happens, though, I think we need to look at it as an opportunity. Again, if we start doing business with China on a regular basis again, I think there's a wonderful opportunity for our pork producers and for our pork exports. In the meantime, I think there's also a pretty good opportunity for soybean meal exports, because while China's not producing hogs, and they don't buy soybean meal, they buy soybeans. So ASF really cuts their soybean demand, but other countries that are looking to fill the pork demands that China has, they need meal. So there's that global meal demand that should be on the rise. And we are not the biggest crusher, but we are a big crusher. So I think we should be in store for some good exports there. I also think that we should be really upping our crush capacity, but with really good crush margins. Our crushers don't want to kill the golden goose, so to speak. So I get that part of it. But I think it offers opportunity until it gets here, and then it becomes a really bad thing on top of a whole bunch of other really bad things. So that is certainly the fear that we have.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't get here. As we talk about meal, have you seen any movement yet on what's going on with prices, either here or demand globally, or us shipping to other places?
Well, prices have been really caught up in the downdraft that we've seen with the fear of not getting a trade deal done last week. That was sort of panic, and meal was not excluded from that. However, if you look at export sales last week, it was a really bad export sales report. Nothing good except for meal. Saw a halfway decent number on meal, and I think that is going to continue. I think meal is going to really be the star of the soybean complex for next year. And I think our export opportunities for meal are going to be really good.
All right, good stuff. Appreciate that, Ted. Thank you so much. We'll be back with more AgDay coming up here in just a minute.
For professional marketing advice specifically tailored to your needs, call Zaner Ag Hedge at 312-277-0113.
Welcome back to AgDay. Here meteorologist Cindy Clausen looking at the root zone moisture map. And Cindy, I see an awful lot of blue on this map.
Oh, you are not kidding. It is very blue on this map, and some areas have really just gotten very wet over the past week. Let's take a look. Of course, we've had plenty of rain in the nation's midsection, through the plains, through the Corn Belt, down into the Gulf Coast states. But what really popped in my eye was how much more blue that we are seeing, how much more moisture we've had in parts of the Southwest. Now, the Northwest has been very dry, but we're going to be seeing a fair amount of rain over the next couple of days, thanks to this low pressure system. That's going to be bringing some rain along the West Coast. Somewhat quieter conditions over the next 24 hours in the nation's midsection. We'll watch this low pressure. It's eventually going to weaken, but not before shooting a little bit more rain into parts of the Corn Belt and Ohio and Tennessee valleys. Putting this into motion, you can see that area of moisture moving off to the southeast, but this low pressure is going to be the kind of the bigger weather maker over the week as that moves on shore, gives us a fair amount of rain, even some higher elevation snow there. We will watch another low pressure system moving across the upper Midwest. That will bring some rain to that part of the country as well, and then we'll see some more of that moisture shooting down into parts of the Tennessee, Ohio Valley and the Gulf Coast states. The past 24 hours, we've seen a fair amount in Florida. We've seen some spotty areas in the nation's midsection. We add the next 24, and you can see where we're going to be seeing that low pressure system, some additional rain, but some pretty heavy rain and even some higher elevation snow out in the west. Warm temperatures continue today. Lots of 80s in the plains today. The cooler temperatures in the far northeast and with some more clouds in the Pacific Northwest. Overnight, we see those temperatures pretty mild in most areas. A lot of 60s for overnight lows, 40s and 50s in the Northeast, even some upper 30s there. Still warm. You can see the warm air continuing to spread on off to the east. Ridge remains in the nation's midsection. You lose the trough in the Northeast, but we're going to see some fairly cooler weather and wet weather continuing into the weekend and early next week in much of the West. That's your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Myrtle Point, Oregon, rain likely for you today with a high of 60 degrees. Aaron Springs, Oklahoma, sunny and hot with a high of 85. And Grizzard, Virginia, mostly sunny with a high of 72 degrees.
Trade tariffs aren't all bad news. Up next, we'll hear from one grower group that thinks it could help their producers.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
The trade war with China also impacting fruits and vegetable imports. The U.S. slapped 25% tariffs on everything from Chinese cauliflower to garlic and certain berries. But the executive vice president of Christopher Ranch in Gilroy, California, tells the Packer he welcomes the hike on Chinese garlic imports. He says it is big news for the domestic garlic industry, saying the higher tariff goes a long way in rectifying decades of illegal Chinese garlic dumping on U.S. shores. He believes other U.S. producers will see new tariff benefits as well. A new survey says California growers are continuing to face labor shortages. It was conducted by the California Farm Bureau Federation. The survey reported 56% of farmers are unable to hire all the employees they needed at some point during the previous 5 years. For those reporting employee shortages, at least 70% said they had more trouble hiring people in 2017 and again last year. Many reporting raising wages in an effort to hire enough people. It won't be long before America's high school graduates are off to college. Up next, take a tour of Tennessee's campus without ever setting foot outside.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
In the Country is powered by Kawasaki. Let the good times roll.
University of Tennessee's Herbert College of Agriculture is producing a virtual reality video to promote its academic programs. Charles Denny takes us on a visual tour that educates the senses.
A campus tour, not on foot, but with goggles. This young man is experiencing UT's agriculture campus through virtual reality, sort of real with a twist. UT's Herbert College of Agriculture is producing its own VR videos as a recruiting tool for a potential student to get a sense of the place before arriving in person.
So I think it's really effective to reach out to students just because they're really well versed in technology right now, and this is kind of something that they're already using at home. A lot of students have PlayStations with virtual reality, so it's something that they know how to use.
One of the appeals of VR is that it mimics real life with a slightly skewed perspective. Everywhere you turn, there's content. It's like visuals on steroids, something the human eye wouldn't ordinarily see. Herbert VR goes on the road. The Tennessee State FFA Conference was held recently at the Gatlinburg Convention Center. It's prime recruiting ground for the Herbert College, and a VR display was set up for FFA members to experience. Ella Pollock from Lincoln County is considering UTIA and liked what she saw.
So once you put the glasses or the goggles on, you see a full 360 view of the Tennessee Herbert College of Agriculture and University of Tennessee at Knoxville. So it's really cool to see how they use technology to promote the agriculture school.
Professors at Herbert are also joining the VR movement, using the technology in classroom instruction.
Virtual reality allows us to take the campus to them. Once they get here in the classroom, we're finding that virtual reality allows students to more fully experience various types of classroom activities and senses in ways that we couldn't do before.
The Herbert College plans to up its use of this modern tech stuff with its creativity and coolness factor to connect with students. When it comes to virtual reality, get used to the view. This is Charles Denny reporting.
It's difficult to say who exactly invented virtual reality, but the first set of goggles were actually made back in 1968. But that headset was so large and heavy, it had to be suspended from a ceiling. That's all the time we have this morning. Sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.